The first question today is from Stephen in California. So how do you decide when it's time to switch from Roth 401k contributions to pre-tax 401k contributions, or a combination of both? I'm single, 25, in the 24% bracket, and live in a high tax state. Stephen, thanks very much. I think when we discuss this quite frequently with our clients, the decision points here are tax rates and time, and we're going to kind of get to that in terms of helping Stephen make his decision. But I think it is important to point out here, Tim, I don't really think there is a wrong answer. There is a more financially advantageous answer based on what we know about Stephen's circumstances. But really this comes down to, do you want more tax-free money in retirement? And we believe, generally speaking, that's the route to go, right?
Right. There's a lot of different factors that's going to come into play here. But yeah, having that option of having tax-free money in retirement to go along with your Social Security and potentially a pension and things like that, it's going to be a huge advantage to have some tax-free money. And the Roth is one of the best ways to get there, and also to be able to accumulate a substantial amount, especially if you get started early.
Yeah, and Stephen is early. He's 25, and he's single in the 24% bracket, and he lives in a high-tax state in California. We know that. So he asked if it's time, how to know when it's time to switch from the Roth 401k to pre-tax 401k. So we're going to assume that's what you're doing, Stephen, and I think you need to keep doing that. When you're younger, and Stephen, again, you are young, but I would even say people in their 40s could be considered younger here, right? Because when we say younger, we're talking about your time horizon until retirement. So if you're not going to retire until 60, 65 years old, and you've got 20 years, you're still younger. So for all the people 45 years old that want to feel younger, there you go. So the point being here is, if you get those dollars into a Roth 401k, they are going to be tax-free when they're withdrawn in retirement. And generally, when you're younger, you're going to be in a lower tax bracket than when you are in your highest earning years, more into your 50s and in those pre-retirement years. So if you're going to pay taxes now versus taxes later, doesn't it make sense to pay them when you're in probably a lower tax rate than you will be later in life? So for our pre-retiree clients, when you're in your 50s and you're generally in a higher tax bracket than you're going to be in retirement, it's probably more advantageous to put those into pre-tax 401k contributions so that you can defer the taxation on them now and pay it on them later when you are in a lower bracket. But that's the general look. But with Stephen being in a high tax state too, Tim, I think it makes sense to ask Stephen, do you plan on living in that high tax state the rest of your life?
That's exactly right. If you move to a no tax state in retirement, then it changes a lot, because then you could have those pre-tax dollars pulled out without taxes. I actually looked up the tax rates in California. The highest tax rate in California is 12.3%.
Okay.
And with him being in the 24% tax bracket for federal, right now he's in the 9.3% tax for the state of California. So he'd be saving 33.3% in taxes now if he went pre-tax. But again, at 25 years of age, really, he's got 40 years for that money to grow, to be invested. And that's another thing that we need to be careful of. We've seen clients come in with Roth IRAs, and they're invested in investments that don't have a lot of growth opportunity. So when you've got 40 years and it is Roth, the advantage, as Scott mentioned earlier, is time. And so when we have that much time, we need to be more aggressive with our investments, because we do want to be able to take advantage of that growth and be able to have those tax-free dollars in the largest amount of tax-free dollars that we can in retirement.
So we're all about education on the Get Ready for the Future show. We do have a graphic for our video audience that shows the 2024 tax brackets from the IRS website. So this is federal, so take the California part off the equation. Doesn't equate to anything from a state income tax level, but these are the new tax rates. So these will be on tax returns that are filed in 2025. But you can see, and again, just for a review, Tim, and I'll let you kind of do this since you're the CPA background. This is not that if you fall into these ranges that's what every dollar is taxed. So you can see it. I think the way they break it down on this chart is good. It shows a certain amount of your income is going to be taxed at lower rates, and then when you cross over thresholds is when those rates go up.
Right. So if you have this is really taxable income. So if you have a job that you're making, let's say $75,000, you've got contributions to your 401k. If you're doing pre-tax, that's going to lower that $75,000. You've got insurance premiums. Then when you actually file your taxes, you have a standard deduction that you can take, which is going to lower your overall taxable income. So really what these ranges are for is the taxable income, not the gross income that you're starting with your job and so forth. So oftentimes when we're looking at filling up a 12% tax bracket for a married couple, it goes up to $94,300, but you can really add another at least $30,000 on top of that for the standard deduction. And so someone could make $125,000 but still be in the top tax bracket of 12% for them.
Yeah.
So that definitely helps. And then when we actually get someone to retirement, with the income that they're getting, we might consider some Roth conversions. And that's when we fill up those brackets and such so that we can go ahead and take those lower tax rates on that money and convert it and pay the lower tax rate, but then get it into a Roth so that it can then grow tax-free for the rest of your time.
Yeah, and that's another great thing to talk about, too. When you look at those tax rates, let's say someone walking into their pre-retirement years is in the 24% federal tax bracket, married filing jointly, but when they roll into retirement, they've got a plan to live on something that will probably barely crack the 12% bracket, right? So there's a big gap there in if you want to, as we say, fill up the tax bracket by converting dollars from traditional IRA to Roth IRA. That's a great time to do it when your income significantly drops at your retirement. And that's not something that people do a whole lot. We get asked about it a lot. We talk about it a lot. The reality is, I think, Tim, the reason people do hesitate on this is that you do have to have the cash on hand to pay the taxes, because we're going to convert every dollar. The traditional IRA converts to a Roth IRA. If you got $100,000, all $100,000 is converting. You're not going to take the taxes out of the investments. So you've got to have about potentially $20,000, let's say, on hand to pay the taxes if you're going to convert $100,000.
Exactly. And so that's why a lot of people want to maybe pass on that. But, if you do have an early retirement of maybe early 60s and you've got 15 or 20 years, again, it goes back to the time that we have for that Roth to grow, then it may make sense to go ahead and try to find those other dollars to pay those taxes. One of the other things we have to remember is that, we're right now living in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 tax rates. Yeah. And those are set to sunset at the end of 2025. So 2026, we actually revert back to the old tax rates unless something is done. And then we know how our government has printed so much money and gone into so much debt. Most of us believe that tax rates 10, 15 years from now will be higher than they are today. So it would probably benefit a lot of people to have some more Roth dollars to be able to pull that out tax-free in retirement and not have to worry about those higher tax rates.
I was watching a video the other day that was discussing tax rates in the future, and they said that obviously you don't think of that when you see that tax table up there, that your top tax bracket is 37%. We don't think about being in a low taxation time in terms of historical tax tables. But this video I was watching said that right after World War II in the 1950s, during the Eisenhower administration, the top tax rate was 91%.
Ouch.
So 37 doesn't sound so bad when you see 97. Now, nobody wants to pay 91 again, and I don't think we're headed there anytime soon. But to Tim's point, in the future, you could see tax rates higher than they are today. Stephen, thanks for that question. Hope we gave you some guidance on there. But being 25, I'd say keep going with the Roth for quite some time, even though you live in that high-tax state. If you've got questions, call or text them to us at 501-381-5228. You can leave a voicemail or just shoot us a text, or you can also send us an email, show@getreadyforthefuture.com.